Welcome to Season 3 of Lucid Cafe. I'm your host, Wendy Halley. Okay, so it seems like several years worth of insanity has transpired in the world since I dropped the last episode of Season 2 at the end of June. That's only 4 months ago. Whew, man, what a ride it's been, and will continue to be. Given that, I hope you're hanging in there and able to find ways to take good care of yourself, occasionally laugh your ass off. If you're in need of something to temporarily take your mind off of all the craziness, you could check out the satirical, frequently inappropriate podcast I co-host with my buddy Claire. We give really great advice on important things like how to deal with assholes, how to win a fight, how to start a cult. You can look for Inside the Box with Claire and Wendy on whatever podcast platform you use. I'll also include a link in the show notes. Speaking of shows, it's good to be back in front of the mic again. I'm psyched to share this first episode with you. I had the good fortune to talk with author Martha Hunt Handler about her new spiritually tinged young adult book titled Winter of the Wolf, as well as her fascinating connection with wolves and the wolf conservation work she's been involved with. A little bit about Martha. She grew up in northern Illinois dreaming about wolves and has always known that her role is to tell stories and to be a voice for nature. She's been an environmental consultant, a magazine columnist, an actress, and a polar explorer. That's something we did not talk about. She also drove across the country in an 18-wheeler and was a grand prize winner of the Newlywed Game. Soon after she and her family relocated from Los Angeles to South Salem, New York, she began hearing wolves in her backyard. This was the start of her work as an advocate for wolves at the Wolf Conservation Center, where she currently serves as board president. Please enjoy my conversation with Martha Hunt Handler. Martha, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm so glad to be here with you.
You just released your first book?
I just released my first book. It's very exciting. Yes,
it always is. And you've been working on this one for a long time from what I gathered.
Yes, 18 years.
Holy cow. Is it very different than the version that you started with?
It's much shorter. Let's just say that. I think I went from 30,000 words to 26,000 words. I think I fell into every first novelist's hole where you just kind of put everything that's ever happened to you that you think is important in a novel that doesn't really need to go there.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Absolutely. So the novel, I'm talking about it, and I haven't even told anyone what it is yet. It's called Winter of the Wolf. It's a YA novel. Let me just read this little overarching description. It says, a tragic mystery blending sleuthing and spirituality.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of it. Should I go into
Please.
Okay. The reason it started 18 years ago was, although I was brought up incredibly spiritual and had a very good practice going with one of my best friends growing up, 18 years ago, she found her 12-year-old son hanging, and he hadn't been suicidal, hadn't been depressed. It came out of nowhere, and I found myself so completely lost in my own stuff and unable to be a good friend to her because I couldn't think of words to say or any explanation why a 12-year-old would depart our realm. Like, what had he done? What had we learned from him? It was just this horrible cycling. So I started journaling just to get my own thoughts down, and was also listening to so many people that I hadn't really appreciated how suicides are different and how much guilt is laid on the survivors. Like, why didn't you get him help? How could you not notice that he had issues? All these things. And she was always very clear in her mind, the mother, that he didn't commit suicide, which it clearly looked like when it was hard to see how it could be anything other than that. But anyway, I just kept journaling. I journaled probably for about 6 months. And then I saw a deer frozen into the surface of a lake. And for some reason, seeing that deer triggered something. And I started channeling her son, who was convincing me that my journal entries should be a novel and that I had the story that I'd always been looking for that I could tell. And he would be with me to help me in my journey to get this to be a novel. And so it was an interesting take after that, because what I found and how the novel got so large is that once you open yourself up to the other side, there's a lot of other voices that wanted to come through. And I had to sort of learn how to just focus on this boy, Brendan. And though the story is not his story, and he was clear that he didn't really want it to be, he just felt like it was a good story that needed to get out there about a lot of different things. Yeah, so other than the way he dies, the story isn't really anything to do with Brendan's life. But yeah, just the everyday showing up and having discussions with someone on the other side, I just never experienced before and haven't really since. I mean, since I finished and kind of, I haven't gone back into that space. And I'm just kind of figuring out, like, what is my role? Because during this time, so it got released about 6 weeks ago, I'm hearing from so many people that are reading it that are dealing with either COVID deaths or unrelated deaths or overdoses. We've had 6 people in their 20s and early 30s overdose, either my friends' children, or I have 4 kids in their 20s. They've lost 4 friends. So I'm doing a lot of, like, sort of grief counseling, because I believe so strongly that there is no such thing as death, and it's just a transition. And that's a lot of what my novel is about. And so it's been interesting having these discussions with people, because they're coming to me for advice. It wasn't something I ever thought would happen from the book, but I'm just following it because it feels all of a sudden like maybe this is my journey and where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Wow. So that's quite an introduction to this novel. So let me back up a little bit. This young man, Brennan, was it sparked by seeing the deer frozen in the ice? That's what opened the door to communicating with him?
Yes.
And then he becomes kind of like your writing ally, huh?
Yes.
Where he's sort of helping you co-write.
Yes. He was my co-writer. I don't give him any credit on the novel, but yes.
Beautiful. Did you tell his mom this?
Yeah. So when I figured out that it was going to be a novel, I asked her permission and she was fine with it. And she helped me through the death scenes a few years after that, when I felt like she might be in a good enough place to tell me, what he looked like, what happened when the EMTs came, all that kind of medical stuff that I needed to put into the novel.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, when I sent it to her a few months ago, she said, I feel like maybe this is the thing that's going to let me finally step into a better place, which was obviously good to hear.
Were you worried about her reaction?
Not really. I mean, I'm close enough to her. I knew that there's nothing that I don't think she could ever be offended by, since it's not really his story.
Right.
And I think it helped her a lot. Just, we've been talking a lot about her mother used to have a spiritual group, which was just like 4 or 5 of us that used to meet in her living room. And her mother would just, get us books to read, and we would talk about things. And then in the middle of this, when I was like 17, her 15-year-old sister passed away of a brain tumor, incredibly sudden. Didn't know anything was wrong with her besides she suddenly was having like migraine headaches after been to a lot of doctors and no one told her what it was. And so then it was like, okay, let's try to communicate with Sarah. And Sarah came through really loud and clear. So it was such a good foundation for me to be, I don't know, just that faith that there is no such thing as death. And my mother had always taken me to funerals when I was a little kid. And I remember always being able to see the souls somewhere in the room, usually. And we would leave and she'd say, was their soul there? I mean, just that constant reinforcement that you're not crazy. This is real. You can't maybe talk to everyone about it, but don't have doubts about what you're seeing and what you're feeling.
Wow. All right. So the groundwork was laid pretty early for you to have these kinds of experiences, or to be at least open to them.
Yes.
How cool. And I'm curious, how do you perceive souls?
As these energy forces that never diminish. Obviously, energy can't, and we know that so strongly, but we're on this path of learning, and you choose to be born into a situation with your particular parents and your location and what is going to go on with your life. And maybe sometimes those things don't quite work out, and what it looked like you were coming into might not really be a great situation for you to be able to learn your soul lessons for that lifetime. And so there's ways of exiting, which I think was Brandon's opportunity that he took. For whatever reason, it just wasn't in a place that he was going to be able to grow from very much, is my feelings that I got from him. Yeah. So I think just that, that, okay, we're all just learning. We're all just here to learn. And it helps me a lot dealing with people that are difficult, or, yeah, I mean, it's just, if I can just step back and say that we're all just here to learn. That's it.
Right. Makes it a little less personal if you can get to that place. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm struggling. This person's struggling. We're all just kind of struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading this funny thing. This was way back when George W. Bush was president, and this woman had written this story about she was waking up every day and her husband was just a complete grump, like just didn't like the president, didn't like what he was doing. And every day it was just this. And she finally said, I can't take it anymore. I mean, I don't want to leave you because we've been married for 30 years, but I don't want to listen to it anymore. He's just a soul. He's just a person. He's doing as best as he can. And that night her husband had this dream that he was sitting at a bar, and George W. walks in and sits down next to him. And he was saying, boy, you have no idea what my life has been like. Like, I don't want to be president. I never want to be president. This is my daddy's idea. I'm a farmer. I just want to be on a ranch. That's all I've ever dreamed of being. And I'm so out of my element. And I've never had a choice in my life at all. It was all decided for me. And so like her husband just like woke up from the dream saying, wow, I'm sorry. I saw another side here.
Hilarious. Huh. Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have. I agree wholeheartedly. I guess the tricky part is being able to access that,
Yes.
especially when you're in the thick of it.
Yes, very hard.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about your spiritual frame, but I want the listeners to hear more about your book. Like, what is the premise of it? Can you describe?
Yes. So, and I would start by saying it, even though it's a YA book, it's a crossover book, sort of like The Lovely Bones. I mean, and the only reason we marketed it as YA is it's easier to sell as a new author a YA book than it is general fiction.
All right. So let me just insert right here. I don't think I've said what YA stands for. It's for young adult, for those of you who aren't aware of that. Okay. Please go ahead.
People ask me, like, at what age do you think you could have your child read it? And I guess I would say you should read it first because it's heavy. It's heavy material. So the protagonist is a 15-year-old girl named Bean, and her 17-year-old brother, who was her soulmate and just closest, dearest, best friend, she finds hanging from a belt. She has two older brothers, but she's not nearly as close to them. And this boy, whose name was Sam, is been a strong force for ecology and the environment. He became sort of obsessed with Inuit, which is a Native American population in northern Canada. And he sort of tries to live a life in accordance with they would live a life, which is just really honoring animals' souls and believing that we have totem animals and that the animals that show up around you are there for a reason and it's worth investigating, and just, living a very honest life where animals are concerned. Like, it's fine if you need to hunt and kill a deer because it's going to provide for your family that winter, but if it's just for the sport of it, it's not okay. And that there's respect needs to be shown for souls of animals and people. So she grows up with all this. And when she finds him dead, she's beyond shocked. And her family is pretty shut down. Her mother was also very spiritual, and they used to talk all the time, but her mother's not really leaving her bedroom. Her dad doesn't want to talk. Her two brothers don't want to talk. So she's kind of left on her own. And she retreats for many months. Finally, her best friend convinces her, like, let's figure out why you can't get over this. And she kind of admits, well, I don't know how to grieve for a brother that would have done this, because, the brother I knew would have never left me on purpose. And so she's like, okay, let's investigate. You said that the police and the investigators did very little research. Let's see if there's some other explanation for this. So that's the mystery part of it, because she and her best friend sort of go on this wild journey to figure out, interview people that he's talked to, read through his Inuit books to see if any explanation is in there. They do a shamanic session to see if they can contact him. Just a bunch of like cool things, witchy kind of things that two 15-year-old girls might do to try to contact Sam. And I think, along the journey, a lot is gained by both of them. And they're kind of reconnecting to their spiritual beliefs, to believe that does it really matter how he left? The fact is he's gone and we have to live with it. But what we do have is all the amazing things that he taught us in the time that he was here. And he really did. So they kind of open up to all kind of going from grief to gratitude of like, okay, he was in my life for 15 years and that was just an amazing soul to have around me. And I'll never forget what he taught me. And that's what I get to keep of him.
Let me insert that I love that aspect of the story, the evolution of Bean's character as she's trying to figure out what happened to her brother.
One of the most important things for me is that especially young people get in touch with the things that they already know. I mean, I was so fortunate to have a mother who would always say to me, when I would say, like, does God exist? She's like, what do you think? Or, I don't know if I should go to this party tonight. And she's like, what is your gut telling you? And I'd be like, doesn't feel very good. She goes, then you probably shouldn't. Like, it was just always reinforcing that we are these beings that have this incredible system within us that basically is always telling us, yes, no, danger, don't go there. Yes, this person's great. This energy is wonderful. And I think if you're brought up like that from a young age, you believe in it so much more.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that your mom is a rare breed.
Very rare.
How fortunate for you to have that. I'm just imagining what my life would have been like if I had a mom that was that kind of supportive of that inner wisdom that we all have.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, Bean just doesn't back down. I mean, she won't take suicide as a possibility. And I always say, like, she's my idealized self. If I had, even with my mother growing up that age, it was easy for adults to say one thing and send you off. Like, I mean, this is not a good example, but it did happen to me. When I was 7, I had written and illustrated a book. My parents were out to dinner. I had a babysitter I didn't like, so I was sitting in my room by myself, and I'm like, I'll write a book. And I loved the experience so much. And I stayed up late to see my parents when they came home so I could present them with this amazing book. And my dad was very dismissive and said, the artwork isn't very good. The writing isn't much better. And I was like, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. He was like, writers don't make any money. That's not a way to support yourself. You need to think of another career. And I really think I listened to him so strongly that I never took pen to paper again for many, many, many years, because I could still hear his voice in me.
Ouch.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you read Untamed by Glennon Doyle?
No, I didn't.
It's a really honest memoir. The one thing that stuck out to me was she becomes bulimic at 10 because one of her teachers says, oh, you're getting round in the middle. You're going to have to watch that for the rest of your life. And I just want adults to wake up to, like, one sentence can send someone spiraling down, and our words are very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, as I'm a psychotherapist, so I see the results of that all the time. And of course, in my own life as well. I think we all are affected by the words. Sometimes I would say most of the time they're not intended to be malicious or hurtful, but it doesn't mean you're not going to take them, especially as a kid, in a hurtful way.
Right.
Like, they're not going to hurt you really deeply and then influence you from that point on.
Yeah.
I mean, and then there's that, getting back to your original premise of we're all souls and we're learning, right? So your dad is doing his thing and therefore he becomes your teacher around how to find that confidence within yourself, right? To say, no, damn it, I'm going to be a writer.
I'm going to be a writer.
Yeah. And even if I
Yeah.
don't make a lot of money, like those of us who've explored this territory know, unless we're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, that I will have other jobs.
Yes, yes. It's so true. Everyone's like, how is the book, how are the book sales going? And I'm like, it's tough. It's really tough.
So tough. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And yeah, the business of it is an interesting business, isn't it?
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how much you will end up with is it's not very much. And when you're being traditionally published.
No. And I'm giving all the proceeds to the Wolf Conservation Center, where I'm the board president. And so everyone's like, so you can build that new education center? It's like, maybe buy some windows for
There you
it.
go. I was going to say, yeah, well, we can maybe boost up the library there at the Future Center. I want to talk to you about your connection with wolf friends too. So many things to talk about. So the book itself, it's a really powerful story. I hope people will pick it up and check it out. It is intense. And when you were writing this book, did you have something in mind that you were hoping that readers would take away?
Yeah. So I think that idea that we're interconnected to nature in so many ways, but I mean, certainly in one ways are the signs that we get from those who have passed over, especially if you're asking for it. And I encourage anyone who's listening to, if you've lost somebody and you can come up with some sign you want them to show you, like my mother and I came up with feathers, which is a pretty common one, but and we have all different ways. The feathers can be pointing different ways. If I need an answer that's like yes, no, they can just show up when I'm just feeling really lonely. And they're not just run-of-the-mill feathers. These are really, really special feathers. They're really colorful. And anytime I ask her, she will present them for me.
Oh, you're saying your mom is not alive?
No, not for many years.
Okay, so did you and your mom make this arrangement before she died?
Yes.
That is so cool.
You don't have to. You can do it at any point. I think it's just believing that they're out there. And I always say, like, what's the worst that can happen? So you don't get the sign. But I don't think that's going to happen if you're just really open to receiving. And it could be like, I need to see a pineapple today. You're going to see it. And then it's really important that you say thank you, because they need to know that you saw it and you appreciate it for what it was. But they're very apt at showing you anything that you need to see. So it's a lot about just, what do you have to lose by believing? And then going from a place of grief to gratitude to just believe that the souls were in your life for the time that they were meant to be in your life. So really the takeaway is what specialness was there? What are you going to always be able to take away? And, to talk about it, because we treat death so strange in the United States. There isn't much discussion about it. And that really drives me crazy. Another topic I bring up about is how dangerous our burial practices are. Even cremation is horrible for the environment. And just to rethink that whole thing.
How do you feel like an environmentally sound burial should go?
There are these, I talk about in the book, but there's these green pods, and they're basically, it would be like your body scrunched up into like an egg-shaped device. And from this, a tree seedlings grow. So the idea was, instead of graveyards, there would be these amazing forests that would be full of
your ancestors,
people that have gone on to give life to amazing trees. Yeah, I mean, I just think that's really cool. Another big theme is suicide, and just to really think about the things you might say to somebody who had someone pass in this way, and realizing it doesn't really matter how someone dies at all, and those people are having a tough enough time. I always hate when people say, how could they be so selfish? It's like, oh my God, how could you imagine being in so much pain where you think that that's the only option that you can imagine? I mean, I don't think most of us that don't have that kind of depression can even begin to imagine that kind of darkness.
If that seems like the best option for you, then that's a very dark place to be in.
That's a very dark place.
Yeah.
I think the importance of girlfriends, it always comes up for me in my life. I just feel like they're the ones that we can really open up to in a lot of ways. I mean, I've been married for over 30 years, and I love him, but I can't talk about a lot of the things that meaty stuff that I really want to with him. But I feel like girlfriends are just awesome. And then there's another like father-daughter element in my story, which I didn't have originally. And one of my early readers said, you have her so close to your mom, but mom and daughters, yeah, that's been done. But there aren't a lot of, especially YA books that have been done about fathers and daughters. So I try to make her relationship with her father really come more full circle. She hadn't had a lot to do with him in her life. She always just went to her mom. So she has to start opening up to him. And I think it's, a lot of Bean's realization that she judged even the people in her family very harshly. And just because on the surface, someone isn't talking about how much they loved Sam and how much they miss him doesn't mean that deep down they're not having a really tough time, even though they're able to go play football and be with their friends. And it looks on the outside like they're just haven't even dealt with the stuff at all. The truth is they're dealing with it.
Yeah, it's a powerful thread.
Powerful. Yeah.
So I'm curious about your connection with the Inuit.
So as my character in the book, Sam, I saw Nanook of the North, which was a 1922 silent film in like second or third grade. And I also became I think I was an Inuit in another life. And there was something about watching everything he was doing that was just so familiar to me. And yeah, so I bought all these books. And so when I'm writing this story, all these books are sitting on my shelf and I'm like, here, I can use them finally. Yeah, it's like one of those mysteries in my life. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure that I have a deep connection to them.
No, it felt very personal as I was reading it. And that's why I wanted to ask. I'm like, wow, there's something there about this particular tribe for you.
And I also have that feeling about Native Americans. I mean, my grandfather was Native American. And so even though I wasn't close to him and he wasn't a very nice man, I was like Pocahontas growing up. I had braids down to here. I wore headbands every day. If you could see my office, I have feathers everywhere. I've always collected things. And then I did 23andMe and found out that he's not my grandfather.
Oh.
I have no Native American blood. But it was funny because I went to a shaman after that and she was like, your blood has nothing to do with your past lives. You are connected. So I was like, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that must have been heartbreaking.
That was devastating.
Results like, oh no, what? Man, what a ripoff.
Yes, and it ends up, so my grandfather he was Jewish, and my parents were both anti-Semitic. So I don't know where this comes into our life.
That's interesting, huh?
I had converted to Judaism, and it took me 2 years. You could have saved me from this if I'd done 23andMe sooner. Very funny.
All right. So wolves.
Wolves.
Yeah.
Okay. I had from a very young age dreams of one particular wolf. He was black, and I would always sort of see him out of the corner of my eyes in these dreams, and he had nothing to do with what was sort of going on in the dream. And a lot of times I would just dismiss him because I was having so much fun in the dream. I didn't want to see what he was up to. But when I did follow him, it was always sort of pointing out, it would be like pointing out a friend at my school that I'd never really paid much attention to. And he was sort of saying, this is somebody that you should have in your life. Or it would show me somebody that I was friends with, and the person would be crying. And it was sort of like there's something going on in their lives and they're too afraid to share it with you. But maybe if you opened up the door, you could help them. Or just like places that I was going to see and that I should realize they're important places for me. Maybe a tree that I should hang out with more, or a forest that might be a good place for me to just settle into. And I never really thought about them other than, it was just like, oh, the wolf's here, and okay, there's something for me that I'm not catching on to, a different path that I should probably be on. And then when I was 42, so almost 20 years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, we moved to New York from Los Angeles. And in the area that we're in, it's fairly rural. We're an hour outside of New York City, but I live on a dirt road. And we were renting this house and I started hearing wolves, which I thought, okay, I might be hallucinating because I know they have not been on the landscape in New York in over 100 years. But I walked into the woods one day and found an enclosure with a couple of wolves in it in a trailer. And I knocked on the door and this beautiful French girl came out and she told me what she wanted to do, which was to open a wolf center that would educate the public about the importance of wolves as a top predator and how they change ecosystems. She wanted to advocate on their behalf for bills that were being passed. And she wanted to be part of the breeding and pre-release facility for the two most critically endangered wolves in North America, which are the red wolves and the Mexican gray wolves. So I had just quit my job as an environmental consultant when we moved. I was just going to hang out with my 4 kids. So she said, do you want to help me? And I was like, this would be perfect to be able to give back to wolves when, I've had a wolf in my life for many years and it's always given things to me. So yeah, so that's been my life for 20 plus years, which I love. We've grown a lot in this time and it's just an amazing facility, which sadly is closed right now, but we hope to open up soon.
Because of COVID.
Yes.
So this woman was living close to you.
Yes.
What an interesting synchronicity.
Yes, because it's rural and I couldn't see her at all. Yeah.
The wolves themselves kind of drew you in.
Yes.
With their voices.
Yes.
Huh.
It was wild. She's a very famous French pianist. And she wanted to move to the United States. And because most of her concerts, I think she plays over 200 a year, are in Europe and Asia. So she wanted to be like near JFK so she could get in and out quickly. So she's kind of drew a circle around JFK and we're on the far reaches of how far she wanted to travel to get to the airport. And that's how she picked this little town of South Salem.
Wow. All right. So what do you do for the Wolf Center?
We have normally about 35,000 people visit our center a year. So lots of school children for sure, and families. And we have all different programs from just learning different things about wolf biology to learning about top predators to photography classes, drawing classes. We have sleeping with wolves, which are, we have 12 tents that we have set up. And it's exciting because wolves are crepuscular. So they make the most sounds at dawn and at dusk. So it's fun to be there and be a part of that. We right now have about 50 wolves. So because they're different species, they howl differently. So it's magical. And once a few of them get going, they all howl. And it's just like the most wild thing.
I can't even imagine what that must sound like.
Yeah, you need to come down.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Are they rescues, these wolves?
No, so all of ours are part of the Fish and Wildlife Department's species survival program. So just to give you an idea of how dire the situation was. So the Mexican gray wolves were counted in 1998. There were only 6 left in the entire world. So from those 6, they were brought into captivity, and that's where the breeding program began. So it's this huge algorithm of who should mate with whom. We're one center, there's maybe like 10 others, but hardly any of them educate. Most of them are just breeding facilities. So they'll decide, M123 needs to mate with F658 and we'll get them together. If they're not both at our center, it means flying wolves around. And because wolves don't really like to travel so much, especially by aircraft and car, we're starting to do a lot of artificial inseminations. We're freezing eggs. We're freezing sperm. A little easier to get things around, but we have not been successful yet. And this year was our 4th year. So from that program today, there are 130, and they reside in Mexico, New Mexico, and Arizona. And the red wolves, similarly, in 1973, there was only 14 left in the world. They brought those into captivity, and they're not doing nearly as well. They're down to 10 in the wild. And this is just politically, North Carolina has not been very open. There's a few very vocal voices that have stopped the release program. But we have faith that hopefully that will be turned around. So those are our 2 programs. And it's very interesting. Like we had a pup go to New Mexico this year, and it's a called a pup foster. So we had our wolves gave birth to I think 5 pups, and when they're just like 5 days old, before they've opened their eyes, we take one out and flew it into a wild den, and we know that that wild mother had pups at the same time because she's wearing a collar, and she stayed in the same place for more than 48 hours, which a wolf wouldn't do if it wasn't giving birth. And so we put it
Just kind of
into,
slip the pup in there, huh?
yeah, so this one was interesting because
Surprise.
normally when they hear or smell humans, they leave their den, which is unlike any other mother in the wild that would usually kill before you're going to get to hers. Wolves sort of have a sense of, I can have more pups next year, but if you kill me, this is it for all of us. So they almost always leave. But this day happened to be raining and freezing, and she was not leaving her den. But there was a hole in the top of the den, so they ended up not dropping because it wasn't very deep. So they just literally placed the pup in there and then could actually watch, which we don't normally get to do. But in just a few minutes, the pup had maneuvered over to the mom and started feeding. I know
That's so sweet. Oh,
it's
man.
exciting when it all works out.
Yeah, I bet you that was incredibly rewarding.
Yes, incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. Man. So you're not passionate about this work at all, are you?
No, not at all. And for those of you who don't really understand why a wolf would be very important, because I know they don't look like the biggest creature, and how could they possibly be on top of a food chain, the YouTube video, How Wolves Change Rivers, is just amazing because it just quickly shows you what happened when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone in 1994 and 1995. Yeah, I mean, just briefly, it took a landscape which had become completely barren because all the ungates, so those are like the bison and the elk and the deer, without a predator, had just completely overgrazed it. So the trees weren't growing anymore. The riverbanks were just flooding. There was no trees to keep the rivers in their banks. Almost all the songbirds had disappeared. The beavers had disappeared. The muskrats, everything that kind of lived off either trees or the kills of the wolves had just all disappeared. And in a matter of a few years, everything just starts to come back magically. And it's the first time it's been documented the way that it was in Yellowstone. So it's really important for people to be able to see that.
Maybe you can send me the link to the YouTube video
Okay.
and I can put it in the show notes so people can access it.
That'd be great.
No, I'd love to see it. And I imagine people listening would like to see it as well.
Yeah. It's been a huge teaching tool. I think it's been seen like 10 million times. And it's big now because this is happening in Europe. I don't know if you know that, but wolves are starting to come back now in Europe.
Actually, no, I had heard that.
Yeah. And they have even more deep-seated hatred towards wolves than we do. I mean, and no thanks to old folklore. And, I have a bumper sticker that says Little Red Riding Hood lied. People are always like, what is that?
Yeah.
But it's just, it was a fairy tale based on like, don't talk to strangers. But unfortunately they used a wolf, and Disney continues to do it with Beauty and the Beast and Frozen. It's always like, it's just maddening because it's okay. Here's companies that are teaching children false narratives about animals, and it's just so important.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's why you have an education center, right?
Yes, that's why we do.
Yes. When I think about wolves, I think about my shamanic work. And to me, wolves represent boundaries. And that leads me to want to know more about your connection with shamanism because it comes up in your novel. And I was super psyched to see that you referenced Hank Wesselman and Sandra Ingerman's book, Awakening to the Spirit World. I'm like, oh, check Martha out. It made me wonder does she know Hank or Sandra?
I don't, but I would certainly love to meet them. Do you know them?
Sandra was on the show, my first season, had a lovely conversation with her. And then Hank's my primary teacher. I had studied with him starting back in 2001. So he helped me make sense of the experiences I was having and kind of laid the foundation for me. So yeah, I was curious if you have a shamanic practice or...
I don't, but I want to. And I was so exciting, just to meet you because I just love your philosophy that Yeah, we can all get there. It's maybe some people were born a little more open to it from the beginning, but it's not something that has to be so mysterious, and we're all capable of learning this, which I wish we weren't in COVID and I could come up because I just want to hang out with you and see your center. And
I hope you do. I would love to have you come up.
I definitely will. So I had a recent interesting shamanic experience. I went to a medical clinic in Austria, and they're very full circle in terms of you have to see a shaman as well as a bunch of physicians.
Get the hell out.
I'm not kidding.
In Austria.
Yes.
Get the hell out. I'm going to say that again. Really?
Yes. And I didn't even know that when I went. I have had like bad stomach things for, it was like years. I've been to so many doctors and no one could figure it out. It was probably like 4 years worth of just like, didn't matter what, I would fast. I would eat only Ayurvedic, like really mushy foods. I'd eat only raw food. Just like
You tried everything to try to figure out what was going on.
23 gastric ulcers. I thought this is it. Cleared them up. In fact, I didn't even know I had
23?
23, like 4 that were starting to bleed. I mean, it was just bizarre. I thought that's the solution, obviously, but it wasn't. So I go to this clinic and the shaman put me into this trance, and then he woke me back up and he said, "Do you do something with wolves?"
Nice.
I said, "Yes, I do." He goes, "Okay," because my office is just full of them. He goes, "Okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. I'll talk to you later." And when I came back out, he said, "So pretty simple. The wolves are saying you need to stay on your wolf path. Like you're getting so beaten down by all the other bad environmental news, and let someone else deal with the other stuff. The plastic in the ocean, the fires that are going on here, like just stay focused on wolves because that's where you can make the biggest impact." It was miraculous. I didn't even need any of the rest of the medical stuff, which I didn't know at the time. But I mean, I feel myself now every time like I start having stomach ache, it's because that I've start worrying about something else. And not that there isn't a lot to worry about. It's just that.
So much.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well done, sir, whoever you are in Austria. Wow. Yeah, that's profound, right?
Yes.
Man. All right. That was your first time meeting with a shamanic practitioner? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long ago was this?
This was last October.
All right. And so how have you been feeling since then?
Really good. And every time I start to have a little pains, I know why, and I know how to get back on track.
Your symptoms are there to get your attention, right? So you listen to them.
Yep.
They have a story to tell you.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Nice work.
I love your story. I mean, I guess, I don't know, just I connect with everything that you're doing and saying. It's just so important.
Oh, thanks.
I want people to believe in themselves, to believe that everything you feel is real, and not to just brush it aside, right? It means something. Dig deeper, figure it out.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Absolutely. I mean, I think we can get really caught up in ourselves, right? And need to look to someone else to offer some assistance because you can get so so twisted up in your own stuff. You can't really see straight. But ultimately, my wish is that, and I've said this a million times before, but that everyone become their own shaman to be able to access their own inner worlds and get the answers that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all there for you. It just takes a little discipline, a little elbow grease.
Right.
Which, yeah, not everybody's interested in doing.
No.
And, a lot of people think that this particular perspective is bullshit. So there's that as well.
Right.
So it sounds like you've just, with your love of Native American culture and your early interest in the Inuit people, that you had this sort of side interest in
Right.
shamanism, but you've always had a spiritual bent to you.
Yes. But now, I mean, also just, I would say the best things about COVID have been just getting to read a lot of books that I've been putting off for a long time. I feel like I'm in a good place for opening myself up to this further and deeper than I ever have been before. And because of all the discussions that are coming up about death and me trying to reassure people, yeah, it just feels like one of those magical moments where things are coming together for me and I'm getting some clarity about what's next.
And that is your wolf path.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I wanted to? I mean, you covered so much ground. No, it's wonderful.
It's been jam-packed. Yeah. No, it's been fun. I don't think so.
I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. And I love all the stuff that you're doing. I think it's amazing. And I hope you sell a zillion books.
Thank you. I feel likewise about you. I'll be buying your books.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. So how can people get in touch with you?
My website is marthahunthandler.com. That's probably the best place to reach me and find out what I'm up to and read some of my blogs. And
all right. Do you do the social media thing?
yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Martha Hunt Handler. I kind of use it everywhere. Instagram.
I'll put links in the show notes as well so people know how to contact you.
Okay.
Thank you again for coming on.
This was just a pleasure for me, truly.
How cool and haunting would it be to hear wolves howling outside your house at night? If you'd like to purchase a copy of Martha's book, Winter of the Wolf, or learn more about her wolf conservation work, please check out her website, marthahunthandler.com. There's also a really cute video on the homepage of her website where she's unboxing the first advanced copy of her book. So you should check that out. Alrighty, that's it for the first episode of Season 3. I'm looking forward to sharing more thought-provoking and hopefully insightful episodes with you this season. Look for new episodes every 3 weeks. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.